Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel. My name is Tiffany and in today's video we are starting part 1 of our front porch makeover. Now I have been having all these visions of cozy ways to bring in some fun functional items to our front porch while still making it a very warm and inviting space. And one of the things that I really wanted to bring to my front porch is a game table. We love to play cards, we love to play checkers and chess and all that fun stuff with my kids. And so I saw this picture on Pinterest, absolutely fell in love. So I started scouring Facebook Marketplace to try to find a table that would give me that look, and I majorly scored, you guys. Not only did I find the most beautiful table, I found it for $20. I'm gonna say that again. I found it for $20. And when I turn this camera around and show you this table, you're going to understand why that still blows my mind today. So I'm outside in the garage, it's raining, the birds are singing, and we're gonna start tackling a renovation of this table. So we're gonna take it from just a bland, everyday table to something functional and beautiful and just full of cottage core charm. And let's go ahead and get started. Thanks for being here. So here is a look at the gorgeous table that I found on Facebook Marketplace. Like I said, for $20, you guys. This table is just full of so much charm. I love that it's nice and big, so you can be sitting on one side of the table and just playing cards with somebody else on the other side. And it comes with this great drawer, which we can put cards, chess pieces, checkers pieces, those kinds of things in here so that they're easy to grab when you come outside to play. It can also double as a little breakfast table in the morning, and I just know this is going to get so much use this spring and summer. So my plan is to sand it down, and depending on how that looks, we're either going to leave it pretty raw with just a painted top, giving it like that checkers board, or we're going to chalk paint it. I'm not 100% sure yet. It's either going to be ivory or it's going to be just a really pretty raw color. It's going to depend on how it's looking. I'm feeling more of a painted look. I just feel like that's going to give me more of that look that I'm looking for from that picture. But I also just want to sand it down and see what it looks like underneath all of there. So I love how beat up it is. It's just so pretty. And when I picked it up, the delightful owner of it had scoped out my Facebook page. So if you are watching, here we finally are. And she said, I know you've just got big plans for this table. And she's not wrong. So isn't she a beaut? I mean, even if we just left it just like this, it is stunning. So let's go ahead and get to sanding this bad boy and see what's underneath here. To get us started today, we are going to sand this entire piece of furniture. Now, I am using a sanding block. I feel that these are a lot easier to hold on to. If you have a power sander, that would work for this top piece too. However, I knew I was going to have to hand sand all the other intricate little pieces, and so I didn't worry too much about looking for the power sander. In our monstrosity of a garage right now, it is definitely a spring project, but I like the sanding sponge because it's easier for me to hold on to. I have pretty bad degenerative arthritis in my hands. I've talked about this on my channel before. I've got it in my hands and my feet, so holding on to something for too long causes really bad cramping, and it makes my hands very sore for the next few days. And so using a sanding sponge is a lot easier when it comes to holding on to this. I will be honest, my hands hurt by the end of this from holding on to the paintbrush as well. So at least it didn't get worse by holding on to little bits of sandpaper. So I am using, I think this is 120 grit. I showed you a picture of it just a little bit ago. I don't remember entirely, but I did just order a bunch of items from Walmart, had them delivered, and What I'm doing is sanding off any finishing top coat so that when we paint this, it doesn't, slide right off. And I'm going to use a milk paint a chalk paint for this project. So you don't need to do a ton of sanding because it does really adhere to your furniture really well, but give it a nice dusting so that way you're scuffing it up and everything will attach a little better. Now I've got this super cute helper with me. This is my son, Ryan, and he is just using a damp microfiber cloth to get all of the dust off of the top so that we can work on staining this. Now, I wanted to try a new method for this project, and that is paint stain. So what you do is you mix 1 part paint to 1 to 2 parts water, depending on how much you are looking to have color on your piece. So for this, I kind of eyeballed it, and I'm just using a paintbrush to put the watered down paint all over the top of this. Now, when I've seen this done, it says to make sure that your wood is slightly damp, and then just slide this across the top and then use a paper towel or a linen-free cloth to wipe it down, or lint-free cloth, to wipe it down just like you would if you were sanding something. Or not sanding, staining. I'm so sorry. That's what I was doing here. So I'm just covering this whole top. I was getting so excited about this. And then I wiped the entire thing off. That did not work at all. And I felt like I did something totally wrong, which I clearly did. I couldn't figure out what it was. So by this point, I just focused on getting it all wiped off so that I could start over. I ended up turning off the camera so that I could figure out what was going on. I did this process 3 times. All 3 times I got the same results until I finally did this. So I ended up just putting a little bit of the chalk paint directly onto the furniture. And then I dipped my paintbrush into the water, and then I ran it across the top, and this just diluted the chalk paint just enough that it spread across the top. And because the piece of furniture was damp, nothing soaked in really quickly, and I was able to wipe it off and get that finish that you see there at the top. So now I'm just trying to recreate it across the rest of the top of this piece, and I feel like this finally gave us the look that I was going for. I did have to go back and forth across the top several times because I was getting streaks and lines, which I wanted. I wanted the piece to look roughed up, nothing too perfect. I wanted it to look old and chippy and like it had been well loved, but I also wanted it to be a little bit more uniform. So I just continued to go back and forth across the top until I felt like we got a good amount of wood look to it. It had the wood grain look to it, and I think it turned out absolutely beautifully. As you can see, every time I went back and forth, the way that I was wiping was giving me kind of a rainbow effect there. It was an arched look. So I decided to kind of go from the side to try to get as much straight lines as I could. And I just did this over and over and over again until I got the look I was looking for. My paper towel was very wet by this point. As you can see, it's ripping apart, but I think having it just a little bit damp was what allowed for me to still be able to move the paint around while not completely ripping it off or peeling it off. So again, just keep going back and forth until you get the look that you're looking for. And again, I felt like it just gave it such a rustic look, an old antique look. I really have no idea how old this piece of furniture is, but I did love the shape and the size, and it was perfect for the space. It just needed to look a little bit older, and I feel like this really did give it exactly the look I was going for. Okay, you guys, I wanted to try something totally new for me, and that is called a paint wash or a paint stain. And so that is what I tried here. And it's basically where you mix paint with water. And I mixed chalk paint, the Waverly chalk paint in mineral, which is like a taupey cream gray. And you mix it with water, and then you brush it on, and then you wipe it off just like you would with stain. And it kind of gave it this like whitewashed, aged look, so you can see the difference between the two. I'm obsessed. It was a process. I think that I mixed too much water and paint in my little cup. So what I ended up doing was just putting the paint directly onto the furniture and then wiping it across with a wet brush and then wiping it off. And it looks phenomenal. I like how it looks splotchy. And then I think once it's dry, I can go back in and kind of just lightly sand some areas to give it a little bit more of like a beat up look. And when I sanded it down, I purposefully over sanded the edges so that there would be parts that look a little bit more distressed than others. And I'm just beside myself with how this turned out. It turned out so much better than I thought it was going to. Please disregard my messy garage in the background. Like, this is a future project, but normally my car is parked in here. So anyway, I am obsessed. So I think now we're just going to have to try to do this across all of the legs. I would recommend putting down a sheet or, some kind of paint thing if you don't want to get stuff on your garage floor. We're going to refinish our garage floor, so I'm not worried about it. But yeah, this is fantastic. And as it dries, I think it will just get better. I like that it's grainy. Like, you could make this less opaque and you can make it more sheer so you could see more of the grain, but I think this is perfect. So let's keep going now with the rest of it. I love this piece of furniture, and I think I'm gonna love it even more. I wanted the wood, but I also wanted for it not to compete with our wood beams that we have there now. So this, I think, is a happy medium. Working on the rest of this furniture piece was kind of a pain in the neck, I'm not gonna lie. I just made myself comfortable on the floor in my garage and worked in batches. And what I did, because it wasn't flat like the top, was I put a little bit of paint on the paintbrush, and it was a very damp paintbrush, and I just worked it into the furniture, and then I just went back and forth over and over and over again until I got that desired wood grain look. And it did work. I think this turned out perfectly. And eventually what I started doing when I got down to the spindles, because I was not going to use that paintbrush on all of the spindles, was I just used a slightly damp, paper towel and rubbed it in. So there you see I'm using the paintbrush, I'm rubbing it in, it's wet, so it's dripping everywhere, and then I'm going back in, trying to wipe it down, and using the paper towel and using the paint like stain was just so much easier. Okay, so here's where we're at right now. I did the whole thing. It needs to dry a little before I can go back in and touch up some darker spots. But the top is dry. So here's the look. It's like very chippy. I do have a matte top coat, the Waverly top coat. So I will be like fully sealing this because it's going to be on my front porch. But I am obsessed with how this looks right now. I think it looks amazing. I love how it looks so old and just well-loved and chippy. What I ended up doing towards the end, and I just turned off the camera because I just needed to be in the zone, but what I ended up starting to do was kind of making the wood just a little bit damp with the wet paintbrush, and then I put the paint on a paper towel and I just rubbed it in like stain. And I think it looks amazing. So let me know what you think. We are on to day 2 now of working on some projects for the front porch. And today we're going to be making a wall hook item. I don't know what you would call this. I kept asking Danny what I should call it. I kept wanting to say shelf. It's not a shelf, but basically what I wanted was a piece of wood that I could stain, put some wall hooks on it, and then attach it to my front porch where I could hang some decor items from it. So he went to the store and grabbed me a 1x8 piece of pressure treated wood. This is pressure treated, just means that it's been treated in a way that allows for it to be outside and it's not going to rot. It's just going to be a nicer piece of wood for being outside. So currently I am staining it the color Early American. I shook my stain up really well, and then I just barely dipped my paper towel into the stain and then I rubbed it on. I did the front, or the top if you will, and then all 4 sides, since I wasn't sure what you were going to be able to see. And then I did 2 coats. I did really, really thin coats, went back over and made sure that I wiped off any excess, and I did not use any paintbrush while applying my stain. This allowed for me to control how much stain I was putting onto the pressure treated wood, and it wouldn't get too dark. I didn't want anything that was going to be too dark, and you have to be careful with Early American stain because it can get dark if you put too much. To give it a little bit more of an antique look, a little bit more of a worn-in look, I went back over it with antique white stain, and this just gave it that perfect patinaed look, just wood that had been sitting out in the sun and had gotten a little bit of sun bleach, and I felt like it matched the table a little bit better. So I did go in with 2 coats of the antique white, and I'm now obsessed with this stain and feel like I want to stain all of the things with the antique white. I did let this dry, and once it was dry, I went back over it with a clear coat, which is what I'm going to do here to the table. This is the table the next day after I had let it dry. I wiped it down and made sure that there wasn't anything, on the top like debris. And now I am using the clear coat that goes with the chalk paint, the Waverly clear coat. I'll have it linked for you down below. I'm using a synthetic brush here and just wiping it on, flinging it all over my garage. But that's what garages are for, right? For projects. I don't have a workshop, so this is it. And I just covered the entire piece all over the top, all over the sides, all over the spindles. And this is a non-yellowing clear matte top coat for indoor and outdoor use. So it's going to protect the piece and keep it from getting yellow. I did do 2 coats over the entire thing. Just make sure you let it dry in between. Next up, Danny and I decided to work on putting all of the hooks onto the little piece of wood that I stained, and I think it looks perfect. I did go over this with a sanding sponge, that same sanding sponge, to soften up the edges and just give it a little bit more of a lived-in look. If I was a little bit more patient and had given myself a little bit more time, I would have loved to have gone in with a hammer and a chisel of some kind to kind of rough up the wood a little bit more, make it look a little bit more worn in, just kind of like a piece of barn wood, but that is okay. I love how this turned out anyway. I used 5 hooks. These are the same hooks I have inside of my house, and I am in love with this. We mounted it here right above the table, and I cannot wait for you to see this all decorated. It turned out perfectly, and I know this is going to be gorgeous all throughout the year for all the different seasons. This is screwed directly into our house, so through our siding. So this will be here permanently, or we'll have to replace it with something else because it is drilled directly into the house, but it's really, really sturdy, and I know I can hang pretty much anything up here. That's going to bring us to the end of part 1 of this front porch makeover. I am so excited to get to decorating. I love how this little table turned out. It's perfect for a little breakfast nook, a place to come play cards, or just a great place to come sit and enjoy the beautiful outdoors. I think it turned out beautifully, and I love the little mounted wall hooks. Those are going to be great to decorate. Make sure you come back to check out part 2, and I will see you in the next one. Take care, my friends.